My name is Elizabeth, and I'm the Federal Treasurer of Socialist Action and a retired member of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Socialist Action is pleased to host a special public forum, Turkey in Revolt. Socialist Action is a revolutionary socialist political organization in solidarity with the Fourth International, which is active in over 40 countries, including Turkey, around the world. We are proud to be associated with Youth for Socialist Action, a new youth group in solidarity with SA. Both SA and YSA are actively involved in the labor movement, the NDP, anti-war, students, and feminist struggles. We participate in international solidarity, anti-poverty, pro-environment, gay liberation, and other social protest movements. SA is the host of Rebel Films, held on consecutive Friday nights in the spring and fall of each year. SA sponsors educational conference, study groups, concerts, and demonstrations. We also invite you to buy the latest edition of Socialist Action newspaper, which you will find on our table, and it's the best North American monthly of its kind. We invite you to visit the SA Literature Table, and there you can find great literature on politics, economics, history, philosophy, and social struggles. To be informed about SA events, because we have many, if you'd like to leave your name and telephone number or email address, and we can contact you when other events come up. Tonight's topic: Turkey in revolt. The dictator, imperialist regime of Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan is facing its biggest crisis in over a decade. The popular uprising for democracy, secularism, urban green space, and social justice has gone from the street battles of students against repressive cops to a workers' general strike. The conflict has escalated from a dispute over the future of public park to a struggle against neoliberalism, privatization, cuts to public spending and public services, deregulation of industry, etc. Over 700 people and counting have been jailed, and over 2,000 students expelled from universities. What's next, comrades? Is this the beginning of a Turkish spring, a step towards a social revolution? We are delighted to have our comrade Yasin Kaya as our special guest speaker, live from Istanbul, via Skype. Yasin is a Turkish immigrant and a leading member of Socialist Action Canada and Youth for Socialist Action. Yasin is a member of CUPE, Local 3903, delegate to Toronto Labour Council, and a PhD candidate in political science at university. There is an 8-hour or 7 hours. There's some says a 7. How many hours different, Yasin?
7.
See, Barry?
Daylight saving time, that's why.
There is a 7-hour time difference, so it is now 1 a.m., 2 a.m., or whatever in Turkey. Plus, there's a lot of tear gas in the air, they tell me. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Yasin in Istanbul.
Greetings from Ankara, sisters and brothers. I'm currently in Ankara. On May 30th, I flew to Turkey from Pearson Airport. And I was very pessimistic about the state of things in Turkey. Both my wife and I were feeling like depressed when we were flying to Turkey, but the day after our flight to Turkey, something incredible happened. And the masses started their revolt, and since then, Turkey is experiencing a revolutionary process. And I spent many days in Istanbul. I was part of the fight with the police. I experienced the whole thing, and as I said, currently I'm in Ankara. This is another central protest. This is the capital of Turkey, and but the movement currently, the protests are slower than before. It is experiencing a kind of a slowdown, but we shouldn't take this as an end or as an end of the movement. As you know, all of the revolutionary processes are like tides. So we are experiencing a downturn right now, but I'm sure that this revolutionary process will continue. I don't want to give a detailed information or summary of what has happened. Probably you followed the events in Canadian media or in international media. So as most of you know, the events started on May 31st. And since then, Turkey has been the scene of a popular uprising. And 77 of the 81 major provincial cities experienced several protests, so it was a national phenomenon. And more than 1 million people protested in Istanbul. The population of Istanbul is about 17 million, and more than 1 million people were on the streets actively protesting, fighting with the police. And other hundreds of thousands of people protested in Ankara, the capital city, Izmir, a port city, Adana, Bursa, Hatay, so on and so forth. And let me tell you the stages of this protest. It started as a relatively small protest against government's plans to destroy Taksim Gezi Park and build a shopping mall there. Taksim Gezi Park is as big as Queen's Park in Toronto. It's next to Taksim Square, which is the most central square, most visible and symbolically important public space in Turkey. And the government or the municipality, Metropolitan Municipality of Istanbul, wants to demolish Taksim Gezi Park and build a shopping mall there. There was nothing new about this plan. If you're interested in political economy, I'll just give you a short summary of what the AKP government, Erdogan government is doing in Turkey and what the Metropolitan Municipality of Istanbul, which is under the rule of AKP, is trying to do since their coming to power in 2001. First, they started their capital accumulation process with selling public assets so that they could get some revenue. But after selling all these public assets, including telecommunication companies, so on and so forth, nothing has left, and then they started selling the public parks or opening the public parks to businesses, opening historic sites to residential buildings, so on and so forth. So the plans for transforming Taksim Gezi Park and building a shopping mall there was a typical step by AKP government. And when like 100 people occupied the Taksim Gezi Park as a protest for that step, the police used tear gas and paper sprays. This was also typical. Since at least in the last 5 years, the Turkish police has been really brutal, and the use of tear gas is like an everyday phenomenon. There is no exaggeration about this. This was also typical. What was not typical was the fact that after the police used tear gas and forcefully removed the tents of 100 occupiers in Taksim Gezi Park, a revolt broke out. People used their Twitters, Facebook, or other social media instruments, and they communicated very fastly, and they began marching to Taksim Gezi Park from Kadıköy, which is a very big town in the Anatolian part of the city. Hundreds of thousands of people crossed the Bosphorus Bridge, which is normally closed to pedestrian access, and they fought with the police. They fought with the police with Turkish flags, with other nationalistic symbols too. There were also socialists fighting with their socialist flags. So it was an incredible moment. And on June 1st, 2 days after the movement broke down, the protest broke down, the protesters were successful in forcing police to withdraw from Taksim Square. So the protesters occupied a very huge square, which is like 5 times bigger than Yangandana Square. And they occupied Gezi Park, which is just next to Taksim Square. So for a week, these two big areas, urban spaces, were without police. There was no police force there. And Gezi Park became a commune in the real sense of the word. People had their own solidarity networks there, their own committees of collecting garbage, own committees of security, you name it. It was a place without any presence of the state. It was a commune. And on Tuesday, this Tuesday, police said enough is enough. They destroyed the barricades and they forced the protesters out from Taksim Square. And they attacked Gezi Park. And currently, there are still protesters in Gezi Park with their tents. But Taksim Square is not occupied by the protesters. And it seems like the protesters are exhausted a bit. And there was a heavy rain in Istanbul yesterday, and the mood was a bit down, but I'm sure that the protest will continue, and it won't be that easy to take these tents, and it won't be easy to end the occupation in Gezi Park. We'll see. All right, so what did these people want? There is a committee, Taksim Solidarity Committee, which is composed of 80 non-governmental organizations, and it is the governing body of the protesters in Istanbul. It's called Taksim Solidarity Committee. And they issued 5 demands. I'll just read those demands to you, and in these 5 points, we can summarize what the protesters want. First, they say that Gezi Park must stay as a park. They don't want the government or the municipality to build a shopping mall there, or a bar, a military bar, or whatsoever. They want Gezi Park as a park. Secondly, they say that they demand that governors and the police chiefs must resign because they use extreme violence against their own people. That's the second demand. And the third demand is tear gas bombs should be prohibited, should be banned. And fourthly, detained citizens must be immediately released. There's detained protesters, and they should be released. And lastly, they want their constitutional right for they want their constitutional right, that is right for meeting and demonstration in public areas. The government does not let the people to gather and protest in Taksim Square or in the other big urban spaces. So they want those bans to be removed. So these are 5 demands that the Taksim Solidarity Network or Taksim Solidarity Committee raises. But what do we want? Well, most of the protesters take this as an issue in national scale, and they ask for government to resign. And I think so. We should second that demand. Government is not legitimate anymore. It's a government that tried to, after that, killed these people, that used extreme violence against its own people, and it's not a legitimate government anymore. It should resign as soon as possible. And there should be free and democratic. Oh, okay, sorry. You can't see my face. So the government should resign as soon as possible, and there should be free and democratic elections. Well, AKP government uses the phrase rhetoric of democracy a lot, and they always refer to 50% of the votes that they took in the elections. But there's an undemocratic election process in Turkey. After all, there's a 10% threshold in the elections, and that 10% threshold should be removed. That's what we're asking. Secondly, most of the media outlets, the big media, are under the direct control of the government. And against this, we should raise the demand for the equal opportunity of propaganda. And if democratic and free elections are sustained, then a real people's government can be elected. So our demands, when I say our, I mean Socialist Action and other progressive organizations, our demands are not limited to demands related to Gezi Park, but we take this as a question in national scale, and we demand the government to resign. And this is a government of neoliberalism, which is supported by the imperialists and has a neoliberal agenda. And these are the things that the protesters want and what we want. But who are these people? Who are the people who attended the protests, who participated in the protests? Well, we can I think we should use class terms in analyzing the social composition of the protesters. And then we use class terms. I think it doesn't tell us a lot if we just focus on their consumption patterns. Well, their consumption, if we look at their consumption patterns, we see that these protesters are like middle class. They have access to technology. They know how to use technology. They consume the TV shows that we consume in Canada. They watch South Park. They watch Family Guy. They watch Games of Thrones. Well, culturally speaking, most of the protesters there could be, they share the same cultural codes or similar cultural codes as we do in Canada. But if you look at their places in the production site or in the productive relations, if we analyze the class character by looking at the productive relationships or relations of production, we see that most of the protesters there are working class people. They're working class. Well, they're not industrial working class. They're not steel workers. They're not automobile workers. But most of them are service sector workers. They're clerks in banks. They're secretaries. They work in tourism agencies, so on and so forth. And they get around their month income is around 1,000 Canadian dollars. First segment of the protesters is the service sector workers, second, the youth. And there are high school students and university students there. And I'm 29 years old, and most of the people, young people there are around, I think they're in their early 20s. And there's a big difference between this generation and our generation. There's a big generation gap, of course. But our generation were promised to get rich. So, I entered the university in 2002, and it was a common belief among my friends, classmates, that we could become rich people. We could climb in the ladders of social hierarchy. But these young people in their early 20s, do not buy those lies. It's so apparent that the capitalism cannot have that promise in Turkey. They know that they will, if they're lucky, they will become clerks in tourism agencies, other service workers, and if they will get salaries which are just enough to survive. So the young people there are potentially service sector workers, and they're among the biggest segment of the protesters. There are also industrial workers there, but the organizations of industrial proletariat is not there. So let me focus on that issue now, and I will try to analyze the participation of the organized working class by comparing this protest with the Arab Spring. So in the media, at least in progressive media,